okay, great. So what's the next stage? Well, the next stage is simple. You go back to the next stage, which is, if you want to go there, is trust building. Now, what does that mean? It means this is when leaders are constantly, and I mean constantly, building trust. And what are those core elements of trust and credibility? And what does it need? What do we need as not just as leaders, but as an entire organization to create an environment of trust? Because that leads to your brand. It feeds into what kind of personal brand you have, and do you have really leadership credibility? And once you do that, then it permeates across the entire organization. Yeah.
If I may jump in, you're on a flow, and I don't want to interrupt it too much, but I'm sure you'll manage.
Please, stop me at every stage.
Yeah. Trust building, I think, it resonates with anybody. I think if I'm going to use the Stephen Covey model of every relationship is like an emotional bank account where you pay in and so you can take out. I'm assuming that some companies will have some equity in trust equity with existing, but it might be limited. So is it kind of also like in the beginning that you have to kind of encourage people to give credit in trust when you're going through this process?
It is that stage is continuous, and it is ever present across the. Of course, why do we put it here on the second stage? Is because. Could you imagine you coming and joining my organization, Mark, and say, hey, Mark, welcome to the organization. You need to trust me, man. We're going to get there.
No.
In all honesty, what's the first thing that's going to go through your mind? It's called blind trust. I mean, you need to earn my trust, and I need to earn yours. That's why once you get people a sense of direction and a sense of membership, then people say, okay, right, I'm ready now to really trust my leader and to really start to also reciprocate that trust.
I'm going to jump in there. I've had this discussion several times with people, and I guess it's also, what you're used to, what your character is, and that's not a judgment, or your cultural background or stuff like that. I'm a person who likes to give trust up front, especially in new relationships, and that's kind of how we got to know each other. We hit it off right from there was no question. I trust people forthright up front, but I'm very quick to assess in the process whether they deserve that. So they have a certain leverage of credit with me when I start. But when you come into a company, some of that initial credit that people afford their employers has already been used up, and there might be some burnt ground. Okay, so I understand that there even more. You might need to rebuild trust. The trust that was disappointed.
Right. Absolutely. And we can talk about this topic for an entire day here on the trust building process. What I want our viewers and listeners to know is that you first make sure that model becomes your dashboard, your team performance dashboard. And very simple. I often ask leaders, are you a trustworthy leader? They go, oh, yeah, I'm doing my best. Well, how do you know? Remember when I said, how do you know that each of those stages are being implemented and reserved?
How are you showing it? How are you living it?
You know what I do is I ask the question, what are the signals and or behaviors that you could potentially see from the people around you that indicate lack of trust in you? What are the signals? Because you know what? People don't come across to you to say, hey, boss, listen, good morning, how are you? I don't trust you, boss. Have a nice day.
Well,
99% of feedback is given to us non-verbally. And if you do not have that kind of a sense of situational awareness and reading the room and understanding that to pull your head out of your, and start to focus on the behaviors of people around you, such as, is there really a lot of caution and a lot of facade, which we know. Tell me any human being who's got enough sense on their shoulder, a head on their shoulders with enough sense. Tell me they cannot identify facade and letting you know what you want to hear and just making sure that there is what we call fake trust and what we call a false sense of forthrighteousness. We all know what that is. We all know. So when you see that as a leader, if you ignore those signals, you're going to pay, again, a massive tax One is that your environment is going to be affected, becomes toxic. And two, your personal brand will never be powerful enough to influence people through your credibility.
I think what's also important, and you realize that I don't think we would call ourselves influencers because we don't like that word. I think we would consider ourselves advocates in what we love and what we exemplify in the world.
Absolutely.
I think I think personal brand is important, but I think once again, if you've left burnt ground before, or you're having to start over again, or you're having to reboot, I think you can ask for some trust, credit up front. But I think this is something that I found on social media. If you're very aggressive and you promise the world and you're kind of a little bit of a snake oil salesman, I think you make quicker impact than if you're honest, authentic, and talk sense.
Absolutely. Yeah,
and I think also what personas, developing a persona that's respected, I think that's a midterm goal. I don't think that's always easy to do on a short term.
Exactly, and I'm going to tell you exactly how you do that. And we're going to talk, when we go through the 7 stages, I'm going to tell you what are those 7 evergreen competencies, right? But think about it this way. You mentioned something earlier when you said, sometimes we drop the ball and we lose our credibility and trust. That's fine. That happens all the time. Yeah. But you need to be able to recover lost trust.
But it's not the end of the world.
You know what's the fastest way to recover lost trust for any leader? One is declare it. Say, hey, I effed up.
Acknowledge
Number
it.
2 is exactly, and number 2 is right the wrong through those by using one of those tools that are evergreen. You write wrong, and you say I fucked up, and you say, you know what? Yeah. This is how I'm going to show you how to recover trust from the competence side of the equation, not from the emotional side of the equation. Oh, I messed up, forgive me, and I'm going to make it right. No, you right the wrong from the competence side of the equation, not from apologizing.
I think
only.
I think one thing is that we often underestimate. Number one, people's attention span is limited. So as long as you're giving them, as long as the new impressions that you're providing them paint over the negative impressions they have in the past. Most people don't really care about what happened in the past if the future's going in the right direction, right? I think people spend too much time focusing on mea culpa, mea maxima culpa. I have to focus on what we did in the past. Yeah, acknowledge it, but then move on. I think that there's this wonderful saying about how do you ride a bicycle. When you fall off a bike, you get back up on it and you keep pushing. The very fact that you keep a forward momentum is what keeps your bicycle upright. It's only when you stop putting forth effort that your bike falls over, right? So
there you go. So that is what we're talking about is the second stage, and this is where it is ever present across the rest of the 5 stages.